Welcome to the Craftsman Founder Podcast, hosted by Lucas Carlson. Every week, we talk to founders, entrepreneurs, and those who've made a craft out of creating companies and enterprises. Listen every week to get ideas for starting, promoting, and growing your business. There are no shortcuts, just good old-fashioned hard work and craft. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this week's interview.
Hello, this is Lucas Carlson from the Craftsman Founder Podcast. This week, I've got an awesome guest, Tucker Max. Tucker is not only a genius, but he's been a 3-time New York Times bestseller. He is a marketing genius. He knows how to publish stuff like nobody's business. He's created multiple publishing companies. And he's best known and most famous for his work in doing college humor, marketing, creating startups, and now that he's the CEO of his latest publishing company. And so I really wanted to dig in and figure out what makes him tick. What is it behind somebody that can create such great work and at the same time not just be creative about it, but come up with all of the stuff to promote it and market it and all that. So Tucker, welcome and thanks for coming on.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So can you tell the audience about your background? Where do you come from? What's your, I know about you, but my audience might not.
Who am I is like a large existential question that I could ramble on for a long time. I mean, educational background, I went to the University of Chicago for undergrad, where I majored in pre-law and economics, and then I went to Duke for law school, where I didn't go to class, but I did graduate. And then, like after that, it's a long journey, but 3 #1 New York Times bestsellers, like you said, publishing companies, startups, investor, advisor, stuff like that.
So you were really good at law, or, did it come natural to you?
Well, it kind of defines how you, or depends on how you define law. I'm very good at doing the things you have to do to get in to and excel at law school without doing any work. I'm very good at hacking that system. I wasn't very good at being a lawyer. I got fired from my first lawyer job 3 weeks into it.
Oh, man.
Being a lawyer and being good at sort of hacking broken systems are not necessarily the same thing.
So I want to get into what you're doing now, but before we do that, let's talk a little bit about your success. Were you surprised by the success of your first books?
No. Frankly, no, I wasn't.
Did you know that they were going to be just awesome bestsellers when you were writing them?
At that point, I did know, yes.
How did you know that?
Well, because I'd seen a huge response. So it's funny. I was, in a lot of ways, applying lean startup methods to my writing long before I understood what lean startup methods were, before they even really existed. And obviously I didn't really know what I was doing. I was just testing and iterating and trial and error. But no, I didn't know I should be a writer. I didn't know my stuff was good until by the time I wrote the book, I definitely knew, or else I wouldn't invest time in writing a book. There is nothing more foolish than taking a bunch of time to write a book if you don't know if there's an audience for the book. I knew there was a massive audience for the book because I wrote the book in 2005 and my site went up in 2002, and by then I'd had millions and millions of unique views. I'd had I had a huge fan base. I've been covered in all these different sort of media outlets, so I knew I had good stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that it's really interesting because I talk to lots of founders who are like, how do I make what I've been doing for years successful? But they've never spent the time to know that it was going to be successful up front.
Well, what they don't ask themselves, is there a market for what I'm doing? Meaning, and I use them, is there a demand, actually, better than is there a market? Is there a demand for what I'm doing? Most people, whether it's art or startups, not most people, but a lot of people, they decide what they want to do and then they go search for demand. And that's really the wrong way around.
Yeah.
The better thing to do is to figure out what people want and need, and then create that.
Makes a lot of sense. So if you just look at the comedy books, you might not realize all this strategy that's going on behind your thinking and your process. And if you look at your career, even past the comedy books, you know, it may not be obvious. Some people might see it and be like, oh, he just came up with some comedy books, haha, and that's all. But can you tell us more about your long-term strategy and how you're thinking about things in a bigger picture? How did you go beyond just writing books into creating publishing companies?
All right, so that was a long sort of process. Basically, I came to the entertainment business out of a law and business background, and I came into the entertainment business as a writer, and my assumption was that, and it was a foolish assumption, but my assumption was that the entertainment business would operate like a rational business, right? And I got into it, and I realized that assumption was way, way off. The entertainment business is, especially, you have to remember, in the early 2000s, it's much better now, but it's still a mess now, but it's much better. But it was a mess. It was, quite frankly, a total disaster in every way, and there's very little about it that operates as a business. And the things that do operate as a business have a veneer of non-business stuff above them, and so a lot of people fool themselves about what's going on. And I basically realized super quick that the entertainment business basically was this black box that sat between consumers and creators, and it essentially exploited creators and screwed consumers. And the whole thing, start to finish, was totally fucked up in every way. And I don't want to say I became a mission, or I put myself on a mission to fix that, but it was more of it was just personal. Like I'm not going to get fucked. That's not okay for me to go in and you know, I'm the one who came up with these, who wrote these stories down. I'm the one who created a new literary genre. I'm the one who put in the effort and the pain and the work and the sacrifice to create art that millions of people will pay money to enjoy. So the idea that I should not only make the least amount of money from it, but not control the destiny of that art is fucking bullshit. But that's the way the entertainment business is structured, is under that assumption. And so my entire, I think, career, at least in the entertainment business, has been about disarticulating that chain or disrupting that box and finding either ways around it, over it, or through it. And I've failed at times and succeeded at other times. Publishing specifically, what I did was I went to, especially after my first books had sold millions of copies, and so I knew my third book was going to be my last, at least frat-tire book. So I was a big enough name that I actually sat down and thought about, okay, what does a publishing company do for me? What do they do, period? Well, a publishing company pays you money up front to buy the intellectual property to a book that you're going to write. I don't need the money up front. They ostensibly, they're supposed to market the book, like help you edit and design the cover and do all the things that go into creation of a book. They don't do a good job, and I can actually do that better than they can. I can hire freelancers to design the interior, design the book cover, design all that sort of stuff. I designed my own first book cover, so with the help of a book cover designer. But so those tasks I don't do a good job at least with me. Marketing, they're basically a joke at. I'm way better than they are. What else? They print the book. Okay, I can't really do that on my own, but there are plenty of companies who can print books you can hire. They have warehouses to store the books. They have trucks to ship the books. I could actually even outsource that. Like, you know, we live in an on-demand world now. They have relationships with Barnes and Noble, with the actual book buyers, and they collect money, etc. That I might be able to replicate, but that would be very expensive and probably not worth my time. So I actually sat and broke down everything that they did. And then I thought to myself too, I was like, all right, so basically the only added value they had to me was relationships with B&N, and then possibly, depending on the price, printing and distribution. Everything else I could do on my own. And so I sat down and kind of thought about it, and I realized, it's funny, there are probably 1,000 book publishing companies, but there really are only about 10 actual distributors, companies that have sales relationships with B&N and then also handle distribution and like physical distribution. And so I went to all the distributors, and I said, I'm no longer going. You can no longer treat me as an author. You are going to now treat me as a publisher. I want a publishing deal. I want your access to your trucks, your warehouses, your sales teams, and tell me what that will cost. And so long story short, I went from making 15% of hardcover as an author to making 89% of net receipts as a publisher. Nothing else changed. My third book sold just as much as my first two. Same bestseller lists, looked exactly the same. None of my fans knew any different, but I tripled my money.
Wow, that's awesome. Did any of the negative press that you got, you've done some fun stuff and some big pranks, and has any of that had backlash? Has that affected any of your long-term strategy?
It's actually a good question. Yeah, of course. Like, you can't carve out a niche as someone who's controversial without it having consequences. Every action has consequences. There's definitely been negative consequences. At the same time, there's been positive results.
Yeah.
I'm not exactly sure, to be honest, if it was the optimal strategy for me. It was the strategy I took, and it was the strategy. There was a point in time where it was kind of the strategy I needed to take. At least I thought I did, and so it's the strategy I took. I would say this. Taking a sort of strategy where you cultivate and are receptive to controversy is one that I would pick very carefully. It's very difficult, and you got to know what you're doing, and it can go wrong any number of ways, and it's gone wrong a lot of different ways for me at times. It's not one I would recommend for most people. The other side of that coin is I am now, the reason I'm so good at marketing and the reason I'm so good at branding and the reason I'm so good at understanding media is because I had to be, because that's the strategy I took. And you cannot take that strategy and be half-assed or not good at it, because it will blow up.
Does it still haunt you today?
Nothing haunts me, dude. I've sold millions of books.
Yeah.
I've sold millions of books, and I'm famous and super successful, and I have fuck you money, and so nothing. I think a legitimate argument could be made that I could have been more successful or could have achieved more without doing that. I don't know if it's true. The argument could be made, but it's sort of like there's a lot of counterfactuals we can run in our lives, but all we can do is actually live once.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not the strategy. I took that strategy. I took that course. It fit who I was at that time in my life. Yeah, I mean, I don't recommend. I do a lot of media consulting and a lot of strategy consulting for very famous, very big people who are way bigger and more famous than me. And I have actually never counseled anyone so far to take the strategy I took. Could I see someone coming along who should take that strategy? Absolutely. There are people who take it and it works well. It's just that there aren't many.
Yep. So can you tell our audience about what you're doing now and all the fun stuff you're working on?
Yeah, so I'm working on two major projects right now, and they're both kind of going concurrently. One, it's kind of funny. I started off writing books about drinking and hooking up and all the dumb stuff all guys do in their 20s, and now I kind of split off, and I'm doing sort of the next step of each thing, right? One project I have is called Mating Grounds. Me and Dr. Jeffrey Miller, who's one of the world's leading evolutionary psychologists, are kind of writing the definitive guide to sex and dating for guys. Because most of the information out there is either really offensively bad, like pickup artist stuff, or it's very agenda-driven, like almost any sort of fundamentalist religious stuff, or it's just incorrect, or it's foolhardy, or whatever. And there's a lot of research and a lot of good information out there, but no one's pulled it together in a way that guys can use and understand and be proud of. And that's what we're doing. It's called thematinggrounds.com if you want to go there. That probably doesn't interest a ton of your readers, but maybe some. The thing that's probably far more interesting to your readers and listeners would be the other major thing I'm doing, which is, it's funny. I kind of have a new publishing venture, and I have a couple, like I started a book marketing company with Ryan Holiday called Brass Jack, and Ryan really does all of that. I'm not super involved in that. I have my own little publishing company called Lioncrest, where we do a lot of sort of the stuff I did in publishing, we do for really big authors. But and then Ryan and I and Niels wrote a book marketing book, like kind of a definitive guide to book marketing, because most of the stuff out there is terrible. It's called the Bookshopper Guide to Marketing Your Book.
Yeah, I've read it. It's awesome.
Right. It's pretty good. If you want to market, like if you don't care about marketing a book, you should not read this book. But if you do, it's sort of like all the best information that's out there together in one thing. We launched Tim Ferriss's books, Robert Greene's books, go down the list, Matthew Berry, whoever you want, mine, whoever you want to talk about. So we really know what we're doing. The one project that I thought this was going to be a one-off side thing, and it's kind of weird how the world works, man. It ties back to ties back into what we were talking about earlier. This new project has actually become the focus of my attention in the last 2 months. So it's called Book in a Box, right? And I developed this almost by accident to meet the needs of a publishing client that I had. And here's what happened. So this woman came to me, and she's an expert in pop-up retail. And she like pop-up retail, sort of like whatever, like not just kiosks in malls, but it's sort of any sort of temporary transitionary space you can use for selling retail, right? And apparently it's a huge business. I don't really know anything about it, but it's a really big business. And she is one of the world experts, and she makes a lot of money every year, millions, 7 figures, consulting and running pop-up retail. And so everyone tells, like anyone who's successful in anything, everyone's like, you need to write a book, right? And she's definitely someone where a book would make a lot of sense. She might not sell a ton of copies, right? But a book is, if you care about pop-up retail, there are no books in it. She could write the definitive book and become the voice, even more, the authority in pop-up retail. So she started, like everyone, like, okay, how do I write a book? And then there's like all these guides about how to be a writer and then how to get your book published. And it's all this bullshit. And she came to me and she's like, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm so frustrated. I don't care about being a writer. I don't care about the publishing business. I care about getting this book, my information in my head, into a book and then up for sale so that I can go back to just focusing on pop-up retail, right? And so it's funny, like the way I started interacting with her at first was, well, that's not the way writing works, and that's not the way publishing works, and you have to do it this way. And I could see she was frustrated and anguished and didn't want to hear it. And then I kind of stopped and I thought, you know what? Everything I'm saying might be wrong. There might be a way for you to get your information. She has the valuable information in your head about pop-up retail into a book, like without taking any time. Because basically I kind of explained to her, and she's like, how can I do this without it taking a lot of time? And I'm like, well, I want to have my cake and eat it too. And she's like, there has to be a way, right? And it's funny, she kind of called me out. She's like, you helped Tim Ferriss. Like I'm not trying to take credit for, I didn't write any of Tim's books or anything like that. But she's like, you helped Tim Ferriss do this. Why can't you help me? And I kind of thought, and I was like, all right, let's think about this. Is there a way for her to write a book in 4 hours, right? Is there a way? And I sat down and I thought about it, and I was like, you know what? There might be a way. And I really I broke down the sort of the idea. What is a book? A book is really, you look at the definition of a book in a dictionary, it talks about the physical object, right? And you ask people what books are, and they even if they don't talk about the physical object, they refer to kind of a book as an entity, a physical entity or a thing or whatever. And I realized that's not what it is at all, especially in a digital age. A book is a singular idea in a self-contained unit, digital or physical, that conveys sort of one piece, fleshes out and conveys one singular idea, right? And that's exactly what this woman needed. So I'm like, how do I get the information out of her head? Well, I could ghostwrite it, I could do that stuff, but I thought, it takes so much fucking time, right? What's the way to do it quicker? And even better, because there's so many problems with ghostwriting. So, which I could get into, but most of your listeners don't care about. But ghostwriting is really flawed in a lot of ways. And so I realized, you know what? What if I helped her create an outline of exactly what is your idea? What is your book about? What is your idea you're trying to convey? How do you want to convey it? Who who's your audience? What do they want to learn? Why do they care about this? All like I kind of came with this list of basic questions, right? Like this maybe 20-part questionnaire. And I had I didn't do it. My publishing partner Zach walked her through all of it, and then through those answers, we came up with a really great outline of exactly what she had to say. Her thesis, her main point, like the 3 supporting points, all the pieces of evidence underneath, conclusion, etc. It was all there. And so we scheduled essentially, it took more than 4 hours. It took about 6 to 8 hours of interviews. But we just interviewed her, like asked her like questions about literally following the outline step by step, very clear, very precise questions. And then some questions were like, oh, well, tell me how that works, or why does it work that way, or whatever. And through about 6 to 8 hours of interviews, we got all of her information about pop-up retail down, transcribed those interviews into a text document. It was maybe 35, 40,000 words. We took that. Now, if you've ever seen a raw transcription of text, like a raw transcription of an audio file, it's a fucking mess.
Oh, it's terrible.
Oh, it's the worst. So many likes and uhs and people repeating, going back, that if you listen to an interview, you're like, that was an amazing interview, and then you can see the raw transcription, you're like, what the fuck? It doesn't feel like that's what I listened to at all, right? Yeah. Well, the brain neurologically processes audio totally different than it processes text, like literally different parts of the brain, different thinking modules, different sort of pathways and all that sort of stuff. And I understand that. And any journalist who's ever interviewed someone knows, like you interview a celebrity, if you put the raw transcription, they look like a fucking moron. You have to edit it and change it all around and make the person look, not look intelligent, but make the text reflect what the person was saying.
Yep.
So we found a really good editor who is an expert at this, paid them. They took the 40,000 word transcription, turned it into a 30,000 word manuscript, and the book was almost done at that point. Melissa went through the woman went through it one more time with sort of our help, like changing some things, adding some things here or there, and basically it took her about 12 to 15 hours, 2 full days. Let's call it 16 hours, 2 full days of work, and had a full book done. Wow. Not 16 hours in a row, obviously, but 16 hours of her time. And then obviously, we put in a lot more time. But and then I realized, I was like, okay, this worked really well. And I started talking about this to other people, and almost every fucking person I talked to was like, I want that. I want to do my book like that. That's amazing. How much can I hire you guys for? And it was like, Zach and I are like, all right, we thought we were going to build this publishing company that did this. And we have clients, like we have a lot of other clients, but like this other thing went from we had hockey stick growth in the 3rd month. Wow. Hockey, like legit, real hockey stick, crazy growth, man. If I showed you our growth numbers, we're adding zeros every month. And I don't mean that figuratively, I mean that literally. And so now it's like we're really refining this process and figuring out how to scale it, because this is what people want.
Yep.
We were creating the company we thought they wanted and we thought they needed. Like I was creating the company I thought that I needed as a writer, right? But there are tons of people out there who want to have books. They want to create books and they want to be an author, and they have things to say, but they don't want to become a writer to do it. Being a writer is a skill, and it's very different than having things to say that could make up a great book. Totally different things. And I through this process, I realized that, and we're in the process of creating a process and then a company that can take people's great ideas, turn them into books, make them authors without them having to be writers.
That's so cool. Yeah, no,
it's sort of like what Ruby on Rails did for programming.
Yep.
Yep.
Like
very similar sort of idea. And it's their ideas, their words, their concepts. This is no content editing. It's not ghostwriting. Ghostwriting costs $40,000, $50,000 to start, and involves a whole other person in your ideas. Is such a difficult thing. This is a totally new way to conceive of how to create a book and how to transmit information.
And how much does it cost?
We generally charge about $8 to $10 grand right now to work with one, because right now the process we have is sort of one-on-one. Like Zach is doing it. I do it for a few people. but it's usually Zach or some other editors we have that we've started to vet that are really good. And so we're looking at 8 to 10 grand to take someone from it's full high touch, full service to go from idea to finished published book, right?
Super cheap.
It generally takes it's incredibly cheap. If you think that you're spending 8 to 16 hours of your time to get your ideas and your words into a finished, published, professional book. Like we do everything. You don't have to do. I mean, you know the process, but your listeners don't. It's like we help you figure out your idea, refine your idea, and then all you have to do is talk for about 10 to 20 hours, depending on how big or small your idea is. And everything else, and then it's a finished, professional, great, super well designed book cover. All the metadata, all the description. It's on Amazon. It looks like Simon & Schuster did it. In fact, it looks better than Simon & Schuster did it. That's 8 to 10 grand. What we're also doing, I think, is we're in the process of figuring out, is there a way to do it even cheaper?
Wow.
There's not a way to do it cheaper that's high touch, right? So someone like you who has money and is successful and you want really high touch, we're always going to have the high touch option there. I think what we're going to try and do is create a software solution.
Whoa.
Right, where maybe for $100 or $200, we templatize the entire process and then walk people through the entire process. You don't get the benefit of our expertise creating the outline and running the interview and all that kind of stuff. But if you have, a lot of money and not much time because you're successful, then you want us. You want high touch. You want to pay 10 grand, right? And you only want to spend 10 hours because your time's super valuable. If you don't have a lot of money, but you have a lot of time, then we're going to have a software process that's super cheap and show you how to DIY everything else, and then, on all the different levels. Here's DIY for free. Here's sort of like the cheap, cheap half do it yourself, half get freelancer help. Here's the sort of more expensive version. Here's sort of like work with us directly, each step of the process. So ideally, our goal is for $100, someone will be able to, assuming they do everything themselves, be able to go from idea to finished professional book without really having to do the writing themselves.
Which is amazing. What is that going to do for Amazon? Already there's hundreds of thousands of self-published books, and something like this can lower the barrier of entry significantly.
I think it absolutely lowers the barrier, because if you look at the universe of, it used to be the universe of books were only the people that got publishing companies to publish them, right? And then self-publishing came along, and it tripled, quadrupled. Actually, it added a zero to that universe of books, right? If there were 50,000 books being published every year from mainstream publishers, there were now 500,000 books being published every year if you count self-publishing stuff, right? And look, most of those books suck. That's just the reality, right?
Yep.
But a lot of them are really good. And there's a huge number of gems that have come out. I personally think 50 Shades of Grey is a terrible book, but there are 60 million women around the world who disagree with me and love it. So and that book would never have been published in a million years through mainstream publishing. So the reality is, mainstream publishing is terrible at picking the right books. Self-publishing isn't that great at picking the right books either, but people are good at picking the books they want to read, and self-publishing allows all those books to come into existence. But here's the catch. It's a lot of work to self-publish a book. Like, just self-publishing is a lot of work, and writing a book is a lot of work, because that takes a lot of time, and that's if you have the skill enough to be a writer, and most people don't want to invest the time to create the skill to be a writer. So there's 3 barriers to entry that still exist even in a world of self-publishing. Book in a Box eliminates all 3 of those barriers. All you have to do is have either time or money and a good idea for a book. Actually, you don't even have to have a good idea for a book, to be honest. You don't. But ideally, I mean, like, if you want to write a book, the idea is this is an idea that should be a book, right? And we kind of, with our clients, we help them understand if it's a good idea or not. Meaning, the definition of a good idea is it cogent, does it make sense, and is there an audience for it? And that's it. That's the only, because I'm not going to sit here and act like I know every book that's going to be great. I would have thrown 50 Shades of Grey off my balcony and told the woman to stop writing. Clearly, I would have been super wrong about all of that, right? It's not my job to sit in judgment about what's good and bad. That's the audience's job. It's my job to enable people to combine technology and my expertise in a way that I enable people to achieve things they weren't able to achieve before. That's what Book in a Box does. And I don't think we actually compete with publishers, right? Stephen King is never going to use Book in a Box. That's fucking ridiculous. Publishers publish writers. Like, I would actually not use Book in a Box for my books. I learned how to be a writer. I'm a writer. I actually work better as a writer, right? Although we're doing a book about Book in a Box, about the process, and we are using Book in a Box to do it because I want to show that it can work. But it's actually kind of hard for me because I'm used to writing, like on a keyboard, writing it out. So I have to train myself not to do that. I'm using our process and refining our process as we do it. But my point is, we're opening up a whole new market. Just like self-publishing opened up a whole new market. It didn't really compete. It does compete with publishers to some extent, but not all that much, actually. It really opened up publishing to a whole new realm of people. I think Book in a Box is going to open up publishing and books even more. We're going to add another zero to self-publishing, and I think it's going to be amazing. I think there's a huge slew of people out there who don't write books, not because they don't have great things to say, but because books are such an inaccessible, writing is so inaccessible to them, whether it's because of time or skill or publishing being confusing. And so they stick to video or other things. And I think we have developed a process to get their ideas into books. And I think it's going to be, dude, it's already working great. It's like, awesome. This is not something I would have predicted. I am following sort of what's working, and it's working amazing. Way better than I ever would have predicted.
So then if you're adding another zero, and we're going from 500,000 to 5 million books published a year, and this goes more generally from just books, but how does anybody get attention in a noisy world? What do you do to...
It's an excellent question, man. Doing good work and getting attention for good work are not always the same thing.
Yes.
How to create something is a problem that I'm working on. How to discover great things is a different problem that I'm not currently working on, but lots of people are. And I think lots and lots of people are working on how to improve discovery. For example, Netflix that's their big thing, the Netflix prize. I don't know how much of a techie you are, but Product Hunt is blowing the fuck up.
Oh yeah.
Product Hunt is essentially discovery for the App Store, right? It's solving a problem. Discovery is going to be one of the biggest problems going forward, because we're going to see an explosion of creation in digital tools are going to explode almost all sorts of creation in all mediums, and the people who can facilitate creation are going to rule the future, and the people who can facilitate discovery of creation are going to be their partners. And the modern entertainment, combine those two things, I think they're going to split off. I think they should be split off. Because they're very different skills and they're very different things. Now, that being said, how does someone facilitate discovery? Let's say someone goes through Book in a Box and they come out with a book and they're super happy with the process, hopefully, because if they're not, then we're going to refine it to make sure they are. And then it creates a really good book, right?
Yeah.
So what do you do? Well, I mean, I actually did literally write the book on book marketing, right? The first 10% of our book on book marketing says, hey, hold on.
Sure.
What? Okay. Okay. Yeah, did no one leave?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, just bring it in and put it here. Okay. Sorry about that.
No problem.
Book marketing, right? So the first 10%, as you know, you read it, it tells people that the most important marketing you can do is do a great product.
Yep.
Because all marketing eventually boils down to word of mouth. I don't care what discovery platform you're talking about, because word of mouth is a discovery platform, just like Product Hunt is, and just like whatever. Pick your TV Guide or Netflix search or whatever.
BookBub, yeah.
But BookBub is a great example. Whatever, right? So because someone has read it and recommended it. So doing a great book is the best marketing you can do. It is not the only marketing you should do, but it is the best. Then we kind of walk through the steps. Like, what do you with a book? What's the title? Because that's the first thing that someone's going to think about or worry about, right? Then what's the book cover? Book title and subtitle. What's the cover? What's your author bio? We go through all these things a lot of people don't think about as marketing, but they're actually the most crucial steps in marketing, right?
Yep.
And so we kind of run through all that. And what we tell people is The most important thing in marketing, first, great content. Second, putting everything around your content that is clear, concise, and relays the value that the product has to the reader or the consumer, right? The worst thing you can do is create something amazing and then not explain why it's amazing. Because think about yourself. When you're looking at a book, the first thing going through your mind, consciously or unconsciously, is why do I care? It's actually not the money. Because if you're a reader, if you're a book reader, right, $15 is almost never, ever, ever the obstacle. The obstacle is the investment of time. Like, oh, I got to buy this book, and that means I got to read it, because if I don't read it, I'm going to be guilty. Blah, blah. So it's like, why do I care? Why do I care about this fucking book? Because reading a book is much harder than watching TV or sitting around with your dick in your hand and doing nothing, right?
Yep.
So you need, like, why do I care? So, I'll tell you, if I have a shitty job in retail and I'm trying to figure out something else to do, and I love pop-up retail, the book How to Run a Pop-Up Retail Empire by Melissa Gonzalez, I'm gonna fucking read that immediately based on the title, because that tells me exactly why. Or that's not necessarily the title, but that title, and then like, oh, this is about pop-up retail. I care about that. I care about doing something else with my life. Yep. That's why. That's why if you look at 4-Hour Workweek is the perfect example. Like 4-Hour Workweek, I can work 4 hours a week. What is this, right? It's immediately grabs your attention, immediately memorable, immediately piques your interest. You look at the book description, and it's like how to get out of the 9-to-5, how to travel the world, how to create a lifestyle business, how to what is this? I didn't know this was possible. I want this though. Everyone wants to not have to work so hard at a crappy job they hate. Everyone wants that.
Yeah. How do you do it
Very
for
simple.
fiction, though? I've seen lots of nonfiction advice. What do you do for fiction?
Honestly, this is going to sound trite. I would say maybe 30% of our book for book marketing really is about nonfiction. Most of it doesn't overlap to fiction, because really the best marketing for fiction is writing more books. Because it sounds weird. Right now, today, middle of 2014, discovery for fiction is broken. And someone will fix that. Or some group of people will find a solution for discovery for fiction.
Why is it broken?
Well, what mechanism exists? If I care about vampire fiction, or I care about historical, I love historical fiction actually. Mm-hmm. What mechanism exists for me to find new historical fiction that I'm interested in?
Yep. Yeah.
No, it's not a rhetorical question. What mechanism exists?
Well, like BookBub would be the closest thing that comes to my mind.
Right, and BookBub's not very good.
Right.
BookBub is the best thing that exists probably right now. I don't think it's very good. Especially BookBub is the best thing in terms of like pushing notifications out. The best thing I can do right now is go to places like Amazon and Goodreads and find the books I like, and then look at what's related to that, right?
Yeah, right.
Which is a fundamentally inefficient and poor discovery.
Yeah.
So I think discovery is broken for fiction. I don't know what the solution looks like. I know there are companies. Book Vibe is also another one. VIBE. Yeah. is really good, but they're better. Neither of them are the solution that we're going to end up with. But that's the reason I say to keep writing, because I don't know of any. All the techniques we use for nonfiction essentially boil down to show other people why your book is meaningful to them. Mm-hmm. That's really hard to do with fiction.
Yeah.
And so the best way to do that still remains informal word of mouth. And the best way to spike word of mouth is to get as many good books as you can out there, to get as many readers, because once you get one reader in your funnel as a fiction author, they're usually going to read all the stuff you've written. And if you have 20 books up there, it's much, much easier to pull people in and sell a bunch than if you have 2.
Yep.
Yeah. And so like that's discovery's just broken, dude, for fiction.
Got it.
That's the best answer today.
So it seems like that's an opportunity for somebody passionate about figuring out that there's an opportunity for a startup founder. So
good luck.
Yeah,
tough.
it
That's
is
tough.
tough.
If you can crack discovery, here's the thing. If you can crack discovery in fiction, you can probably crack discovery in way more lucrative markets.
Yeah.
And that is a huge business.
Yeah, that's a very good point. So before we finish up here, what are some of the common mistakes you see startup founders making, just overall, generally?
So many.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like your pet peeve, like the ones you see and you're like, oh, Jesus Christ.
There's so many. I'm trying to think of some of the big. All right, so what are some of the big ones? Worrying too much about competition. For the vast majority of startups, their competition is entropy, not their competitors. Now, once you get to a certain point, competitors absolutely matter. When you are small, your competitors don't matter. What matters is getting traction. Entropy is the opposite of traction. And most people need to worry about that, and they don't. That's number one. Number two is a lot of startups focus on something besides the only thing that matters, which is having users or customers. Users or customers. Some people, there's some types of businesses you don't have to actually have paying customers early. There aren't many of them, but they do exist. So a lot of startups don't focus on enough on that, or they think other things matter as much as that, and that's wrong. Users or customers. But here's the bigger question about having users or customers. That, like, a lot of them will focus on users or customers, but they don't really understand the real question.
Yeah.
When I'm asking you, do you have users or customers? I'm not really asking about that, because users and customers, I'll just say customers. Customers are always a function of you creating something that people want, whether it's a product people want or a service people want. And are you creating value for people's lives? And if you are doing that, then you will generally have customers. And if you have customers, then you have a company.
Yep.
And that causal chain is something that a lot of founders lose sight of and forget. And it's funny. I'm starting 2 new companies now at 38. I just turned 38, and so it's like I kind of started companies. I sold one failed. I've invested in a bunch. I mean, I'm into 50 companies. I'm at like a formal advisor at like 7 of them. Like, I've been doing this for a while, and it's so nice now. Like, starting it now, because it's like I feel, God, man, it's the difference between going to a country and speaking the language versus not speaking the language. It's like a whole different world, man.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not doing everything right. I'm absolutely not. I'm making a ton of mistakes, but I am recognizing the mistakes quickly, fixing the mistakes quickly, changing, iterating, and kind of finding the right path. Even if I have to make 20 mistakes to get to the right decision, I get the process, and it's quick, and it's functional. And man, like, both of these companies are going to work pretty well. How big they get, they're both going to work. The question is, how big do they get?
Yeah.
And that's a function of how good the ideas is, and I know the ideas are right. It's how well do we execute them? But like, it's so nice to like not be confused about fundamentals, and I was for so long, and I think most people are. And the shitty part is, because nothing in America, our schools and our educational system are not geared to teach people how to innovate, how to start companies, how to do these things, which is why you're seeing places like Khan Academy blow up, and Y Combinator, and Fit 500 Startups. And I'm a mentor at a consumer products incubator in Austin called the Incubation Station. These things exist because people need to learn this, and no one teaches it, and it's really hard.
Yep.
It's really hard. You almost can't learn this without have gone through this.
Yeah.
This is not theory. This is like, it's called tacit knowledge. Do you actually know how to do this? And it's very difficult. And it's so nice now. Once I've made the mistakes, and I know what to look for.
Since you've been through it and you've made the mistakes and you've got lots of advice over the years, what's the one piece of advice that you carry with you as being one of the most valuable things you've ever heard?
What area?
In starting a company, in like entrepreneurship, founding.
Yeah. All right, so there's not one. There's 2 things.
Okay.
There's 2 big things, at least for me. I think if you asked, Peter Thiel and Tim Ferriss or Paul Graham, they'd have different answers, I think, or close to different answers. For me personally, these are my 2 things. Number one, the most important thing for me is recognizing and dealing with my emotions appropriately. Some people don't have this issue as much as I do, but I know that especially early in my life, I would get too emotionally attached to a result, or I would defend an idea because it was part of my identity as opposed to evaluating it objectively and intellectually. I had a lot of problems recognizing and appropriately dealing with my emotions in a business context, and I think I see that a lot, actually. Not a huge amount, but maybe 30 to 40% of founders. Actually, 30. It's funny. I see that about 80% of the time in unsuccessful founders and about 30% of the time in successful founders. So that actually should tell you how important it is.
Yeah.
It might be the difference between being successful or not, and it is the reason my first startup failed, because I did not understand or control or deal with my emotions well at all. And the only reason that startup failed is because of my personal emotional mistakes. My personal mistakes as a manager and a leader, because I had the right idea. I had the right basic idea. I fucked it up, and it was all because of my thinking, not intellectually, mostly emotional. Mm-hmm. So that's number one for me. Number two for me is what we just talked about, is focusing on the most important question, which is, why does anyone care about what you're doing? Mm-hmm. Right? You can sum it up like that. Like, are you solving a real problem? Which is another way to say the same thing. Why does anyone care? Are you solving a real problem? That's really the fundamental question at the end of the causal chain. Like, what is the real problem you're solving? Okay, do you have customers? Then you have a company. Understanding that causal chain and how far it goes back. You got to clearly understand, are you solving or... You can create a company that makes some money that doesn't really solve real problems.
Yeah.
It's not bad, but it's like those never become super successful. Those aren't what really blow up, and those aren't really very fulfilling.
Yep.
You know,
Yeah.
It's sort of like it's like being a professional poker player
Yeah.
or something. It's not a bad thing. I don't look down on it. I mean, but it's like you're not creating anything. You're just doing better at a defined task than other people. Which is like, if you like that, that's great. Go do it. But that's not entrepreneurship. You know, that's not starting something new. That's just being better than other people at a defined task.
That makes sense.
That's arbitrage, actually, is what it is.
Yeah, totally, completely agree with that. That's one of the things that I personally went through as well, and took me 10 years to figure that out. So last question. What's the one thing you'd like to change most about the world? You mean... What am I trying to do personally, or if I could just wave the magic wand? Well, they're different answers. True. Let's say personally. What I'm working on personally, they're kind of tied together, man. Let's hear it. I feel like our educational and governmental and social institutions do not prepare us appropriately for our lives. And one way I'm directly, personally working to solve that is through mating grounds. And the book is going to be called Mate, but the sort of, we have a podcast. It's like it's doing really well, this podcast. You can go on iTunes and look for Mating Grounds podcast. Jeff Miller and I are teaching young guys about sex and dating and relationships, because what's more important in your life than your relationships, especially with the people you love? Nothing. Nothing is more important than that. Nothing you do in business will ever be more important than the relationships you have with the people you love and care about. And no one teaches, especially guys, how to deal with that stuff. And it is an awful, unfulfilling life to not be able to share it with women as a guy. Whether you want to sleep with a bunch of women or whether you want to have one woman and a wife. We teach both. We teach everything from one end to the other, because I think all those are valid, and at different stages in your life you want different things. So that's one thing. The other thing is that I'm working on, it ties in the same thing, is I'm trying to help people turn great ideas into value for other people, right? Or turn their knowledge and wisdom into things that can help other people. That's what Book in a Box does, right? Yeah. And so it's sort of like, if you were to find the thread connecting those two, I think it would be helping the world get better at understanding the things it needs, helping people get better at understanding what we need to be happier and more content in our lives.
because our societies and our institutions do not teach us that, and it's fucking bullshit. Our societies, especially our institutions of power, exist to perpetuate and increase their own power, and that's just the way bureaucracies and power systems work. I don't think there's not some smoky back room of robber barons that control the world or whatever. It's not. Conspiracies don't work like that. Systems evolve naturally. This is the way bureaucratic power systems evolve, man. This is just the way they work. This is the process. It's not designed. It's an emergent property of a bureaucracy and of a power structure, is that everything it does is about consolidating and enforcing its own power. And usually at the expense of individuals, and that's fucking bullshit. And I think there's a lot of people in the world that are working independently to try and make the world a better place for people and not a better place for corporations or governments. And I'm super on board with that. And the two of the things I'm doing right now are teaching men how to have great relationships with women, because the stronger the family unit is, and I don't mean this family in a Christian sense, I mean the stronger relationships between people are, the weaker the state is. I don't believe in anarchy, but I believe in people first before I believe in government. And the better people can create great ideas and connect those ideas to other people, the weaker corporations and governments will be. And I think I'm all for the individual.
Love it. Just one last thing is that in one of the interviews that I heard from you, you said that the future of books isn't just books; it's the multimedia. Is that where a book in a box could go as well? Yeah,
I think that might be the end. You're giving away my fucking long-term strategy.
Sorry about
that. Come on now.
I'll edit this part out.
No, it's fine. You don't have to edit it out. You're obviously a smart dude, man. We stumbled into Book in a Box, and once I really thought it through, I realized, man, if I can create or be part of the team that creates a process that makes creating all sort of creative things easier, right? Imagine if you can templatize, not just education, but if you can templatize, if you can get the inessential, non-important parts out of the creation process, then you can unlock a huge amount of value in the world.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Look, we were talking about this as Book in a Box. I recognize that just like with self-publishing, most of the Book in a Box books that go out there probably won't be that interesting to a lot of people. Some will be really bad.
Yep.
But that 5 or 10% that are really great, this is total power law dynamics. They don't just make up for the ones that aren't great. They create entire new worlds.
Yep.
You know?
Yeah.
I mean, what if the next Harry Potter? We don't have a process for fiction, but I'm just giving examples. What if the next? How about let's do something better? What if the next 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, or Think and Grow Rich, or whatever? What if a book that has that type of impact comes out of the Book in a Box process? That changes
amazing.
The world,
Yeah.
especially because that book probably wouldn't exist without this process.
Yep. Yeah.
At least that's the theory, man. If it happens, it happens. It may not. We don't know until it happens, right?
Yep.
But the idea is, if you can reduce the barriers to entry for ideas, the best ideas will win, and then everyone's better off.
That's brilliant. I think that's a great point to leave off. I really appreciate your time. It's been amazing picking your brain.
My pleasure, man. Happy to help.
Thank you so much.
Of course, dude.
Thanks for listening to the Craftsman Founder Podcast with Lucas Carlson. If you like what you just heard, we hope you'll pass along our web address, craftsmanfounder.com, to your friends and colleagues. Be sure to check out our archive section on our website for previous podcasts. This has been a Craftsman Founder production. Join us next time for another edition of the Craftsman Founder Podcast.